Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. Well, it may be the only Tuesday live stream this year that we're actually streaming live on a Wednesday. With yesterday being Independence Day here in the States, yesterday was Tuesday, July 4th, we thought it made much more sense to stream on Wednesday this week. And we're also excited because we've got a great topic for you today. Here it is, a preview of Cscape 10. So for those of you who are Horner users and who've been following the channel, you know that we've been on Cscape 9.9 really for a couple years now. And even though the functionality has really advanced through service packs and we've added a bunch of functionality, we've all been anticipating the increased features and functions that will be available when Cscape 10 is ready. And we're just getting to the point now where it's getting really close to getting it in the hands of some beta users so we can get it that last mile across the finish line. So today we're really going to give you our first, demonstration of Cscape 10. You know, we've talked about it before. We've shown you slides of what's included, those sorts of things. But today we're actually going to demonstrate using the actual software. So we're excited about that. Now, for those of you who are watching real time on YouTube or Big Marker, we'd love to have your questions. So just chat those in, and someone will be standing by, probably Casey Gardner, to get those answered for you. Now, if you're watching this on replay like a lot of you do, just go ahead and give us your questions and comments in the comment section, and we'll get those answered just as soon as we can. All right, let's take a look at how we're breaking down today's topic. Okay, so really we've got an abbreviated agenda today because it's all about the preview. So we're going to spend a couple minutes on the updated rollout schedule for Cscape 10. We are going to summarize the enhancements. Now we're going to do it very quickly with just a couple of slides because we want to spend a bulk of our time going through the demonstration today. Now, let me say this. This is not a comprehensive presentation. We're not going to be on for 2 hours as I show you every new feature that's coming in Cscape 10. But what we will accomplish today is you'll have a great feel for the software, what it looks like, you know, what it's all about by the time you're ready to start working with it. And there'll be plenty more presentations on individual features in much more detail that we'll do later. But for now, this is not comprehensive, but we think you'll find it very useful. All right, so let's dive right in. Let's take a look at the rollout schedule. The first public beta program for Cscape 10 starts later this month, so really just a couple of weeks away. And that beta program is going to last for somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 120 days. Now, I know that's a pretty wide range, but we really want to make sure we get lots of feedback and that we have the opportunity to get this software in the hands of users so that we can get that feedback. Now, as the beta program progresses, if you aren't involved right at the very beginning of the beta program, there still will be time as it progresses because we'll be adding additional testers as we go. Now, at the end of the beta period, there will be a period of time in which we will be doing development and testing as we incorporate the feedback from the beta so that when we release the software, we've added what you all feel needs to be added and corrected what you all feel needs to be corrected. So that's the plan for the rollout. And then the actual launch of Cscape 10 is going to be during the fourth quarter of this year. Now, the fourth quarter could be anywhere from October through December, and it's potentially a pretty wide range, again, because we really pay attention to feedback during these beta periods. Now, let's dive into the rest of it. Now, from an enhancement standpoint, you can really classify the 3 types of enhancements in Cscape 10 as user interface upgrades, in other words, the tools that Cscape programmers use as they're developing their applications, logic editing upgrades, so the upgrades to Cscape that would impact your editing of logic programs, and then graphic editing updates, which would be, for the most part, we're talking about new features and functions on the graphical side of the OCS. Now, originally, when we planned Cscape 10 years ago, there were a lot of enhancements on the logic side of things. And actually, most of those have already been rolled out through Cscape 9.9. So there's a host of new logic capabilities that we've already released. So a bulk of what's left is the graphics upgrades as well as the user interface upgrades. And let's quickly go through those next. Okay, on the user interface side, again, these are the things you're going to use as you develop your programs. Replacing the pull-down menus, we have a menu button, a ribbon toolbar, a quick access toolbar. So the way you access certain controls and certain functions in Cscape is going to change, and that's probably the part that's going to take the most getting used to, the replacing of the pull-down menus with those controls. Also, one of the bigger things that I think you'll enjoy is the fact that you can edit your screens in tabs. So you won't necessarily, well, you certainly will not have to fire up a screen editor that takes up the entire screen and forces you to work only on screens. You'll be able to work on screens in a tab. And then when you're done with that screen, or you want to quickly switch over to work on Logic, you can just switch tabs and away you go. Now, in the graphics editing tools, in addition to editing in tabs, we've got a couple new tools for you, a graphics toolbox and a graphics tool strip, and I'll show you those during the demonstration today. Now, one of the things we did save on the Logic side of things is the ability to really flexibly configure the way you display your Logic in terms of the colors and the font sizes and those sorts of things, and I'll demonstrate that as well today as you're displaying your Logic. And then there's more user interface improvements, including automated backups, File Wizard. We've made a lot of enhancements to the Navigator feature, and there's a whole lot more. But really, a lot is all about enhancing the graphical capabilities in the OCS, and so we need new graphical tools in Cscape. Big customization of background. So every screen, you can customize the background. Really, every object that you put on the screen, just about, you can customize the background. And it's not just color and gradients and things. It can be custom images. It can be custom patterns, all those sorts of things. So that's really a big change. And then almost all the objects have either been updated or they've been redesigned from scratch. So we've updated the data object for displaying all the data on the screen. We've updated the indicator object. We have new options for the switches and the selectors in terms of the style that you want those buttons to look like. We've updated the jump object with a lot of new bitmaps. We've got new slider and rotary objects, new progress bar objects, both linear as well as rotary. We've updated the gauge and meter objects, not only to include support for not just integer data, but also for brand new graphical styles as well. And then on the redesigned front, all new trend object, all new XY graph, which can be displayed like a traditional XY graph, like pressure and temperature on the two different axes, for instance. And if you connect the lines, it's an XY graph, but you can also choose not to connect the lines, and then it really acts like a scatter graph. We've totally redesigned the alarm and the recipe objects. The video object has been redesigned as well. And I'm excited about that one because that's going to allow our OEMs who ship machines, as our hardware advances, starting with Canvas, they're going to have a lot of capability to include some really functional training videos or potentially help videos right on their machine through the OCS itself using the new video object. So that's very cool. I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but that's something I'm excited about. All new redesigned removable media object. We've got a new clock object, a new calendar object. You can import more graphic styles than ever. So of course you could always do JPEGs and bitmaps, and recently at least SVG, scalable vector graphics. But we've added support for PNGs, which of course can have transparent backgrounds, which is really useful, as well as GIF images. And then you have properties associated with objects that are enhanced to the point where you can actually assign variables to them and change those at runtime. So if you need to move an object around the screen, change its opacity, in other words, how much of the background it allows to come through, change its height or width, all those things can be changed on the fly by assigning variables to enhanced properties. So there's lots to come with Cscape in terms of enhancements, and we're going to demonstrate a fair number of those today, or at least some of them. Okay, let's talk about controller support before we get into the demonstration. So all current OCS models are supported in Cscape 10. So if you're using a micro OCS, XL series, XL Prime, RCC, you name it, if it's not obsolete, it will be carried through from a support standpoint in Cscape 10. Now, if you do have some of those legacy models, like the NX or the LX or the QX, of course, we're still supporting those, but those will be supported in the earlier versions of software that we always make available for download at any time from our website. So you won't find support for those older products in Cscape 10. Now, if you're interested in the new Canvas product, which will be releasing simultaneously with Cscape 10, That's the product that can really take advantage of some of the new graphics capabilities I'm going to be talking about today, and it requires Cscape 10. So you won't find Canvas support in Cscape 9.9. You'll have to upgrade to 10 at that point, but you're going to want to take advantage of those new graphic capabilities. Okay, so enough slides. Now let's get into the demonstration, and I'll see if I can demonstrate several of these new capabilities for you today. All right, so I've just fired up Cscape 10, so you're looking at kind of the desktop area, if you will. And let's just kind of work our way around here. Now, I mentioned before that we have some new controls that replace the pull-down menu. So what you find here, let's start in the upper left-hand corner there. So here we've got this button which provides access for opening a new file, or opening an existing file, creating a new file, and also going down and adjusting the settings for Cscape. So we're going to demonstrate some of those here shortly. And now, in addition to that button, we also have what we're calling, I believe it's called the Quick Access Toolbar. So here you've got a number of commands. Now, a lot of them are grayed out right now because I don't have a file open, but if I had a file open, a majority of those would not be grayed out. But anyway, these are all arranged in different categories. So we have a home section here. Okay, and let's take a look at the view category. This is where we can enable or disable on the fly, the features or the windows that we utilize on a regular basis, like the project navigator here on the left, which is where I have it docked at least, the project toolbox, the project variable window, and all these can be turned on and off, and they can be moved around the screen as you desire based on your wishes. Now, for instance, if I want to move the project navigator around, I just click and drag it, and then you'll see these controls with arrows on them that pop up. So if I want to dock it to the far left, I just point at this guy here. If I want to dock it to the top, I point it at that guy here or this guy up there, and then it just docks it where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here on the left in my case, and then I can stretch it to whatever size I want. So that capability of customizing the location of each of these controls or each of these windows is built into Cscape 10, and it's something that is enhanced in that not only it's a little more easy to put them where you want them, is they'll stay there. If I were to close Cscape now and reopen it again, all the windows are where I left them before, which is different than Cscape 9.9 because the tools we're using from a compiler standpoint are a little more updated. Okay, so that's the view section up here. And then in the controller section, that's where you find the types of things like the ability to set the ID of the controller. That's the network ID for the CAN controller. You can go to hardware configuration to select which OCS that you are using on your project, or change your I/O configuration or your network configuration and all those sorts of things. You've got your downloads and your upload buttons, your run, stop, all those sorts of things. Now, before I actually move on to the rest of these, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new file so you can see some of these actually enabled and everything isn't just grayed out. So I'm going to select new, and I'm going to select, in my case, I like to program most of the time with advanced ladder with variable-based editing. So I went ahead and opened that. So now I have a new logic program open. It's blank, of course. And now a lot of my options up here are no longer grayed out. So again, under controller, I can go to hardware configuration, go to the connection wizard, whatever the case may be. Okay. Of course, we know that when we do downloads and uploads, or when we do downloads at least, the controller will stop during a traditional download. If we would prefer to do online changes instead and do our program changes on the fly, of course, we have that capability. Here's our program section of the toolbar, which is where you find, normally that a lot of these are on the program pull down menu for things like, adjusting your messaging. That's configuring emails and MQTT and those sorts of things. Taking a look at your element usage, setting your download options, building your set point table. All those are accessible from here. And then we have another section we call data, which is where you can configure things like data logging, which is a really key feature. Your report editor, which has been around a long time, but some folks forget about it, as well as configuring your recipe database and those sorts of things. So this is probably the menu that's going to get exposed the most because it has a lot of the most common functions on it. But there's plenty of others as well. We've got an edit menu with a fair amount of functionality, a logic editing menu where if you choose to do it this way, you can add a new subroutine or add a new ladder block. Of course, you can still do all those things from down here in the navigator instead. We've got a user interface section that has a lot on here, a lot of things dealing with Publishing to removable media, if you want to create a PGM file to deploy in an OCS. All your font tools are included in here, all your multiple language tools if you need to support English and Spanish and other languages as well. So again, you'll find your tools distributed throughout these different sections of the quick access toolbar. Now, another thing you'll notice as I go back to the home section here, for instance, let's take a look at hardware configuration. Not only is it available on this menu, it's also available up here on this quick shortcut bar. So, and you can customize this one. So regardless of which menu you're on, you can very quickly, if you want to just immediately go to hardware configuration, for instance, you can just press that button right there. So while I'm in hardware configuration, I'm going to go ahead and select one of the Canvas controllers because those are the ones with the most advanced graphics capability. So that will allow me to demonstrate for you more of the new graphics capabilities in Cscape 10. So I've configured Canvas, the Canvas 7. That's our 7-inch screen with a single Ethernet in CAN port. And I'll press OK here. And now I'm ready to go configure my 7-inch Canvas unit. All right, so another thing I'd like to show you is available in the settings menu. And the settings menu is available here on this button down at the bottom. And one of the nice capabilities that I've really enjoyed so far with Cscape 10 is the ability to really customize how you are displaying your ladder editing environment. So you have complete control over your background, colors, what colors you want the function blocks to be in the foreground, and the font sizes. So if you want your fonts for your comments to be larger or smaller, whatever the case may be, if you want to adjust the size of the variable references in your function blocks, all that is adjustable here in this dialog. So I find that really, really useful. So you're able to really dial in the way that you like to have your logic displayed on the screen. Okay, let's just do something relatively quick here. Let's go ahead and say that we're going to just build a quick project and I'm going to demonstrate some of these capabilities to you. So let's start by saying that maybe on our machine, we want to be able to just to display, let's say, the company logo for the first 5 or 10 seconds that the machine is powered up. So I'm adding a first scan contact here, and then I'm going to add a timer, and I'm going to make it an off delay timer that will be energized on the first scan and will retain power flow for 5 seconds. And I'm just going to call this a logo timer because we're going to use it to display our logo, let's say for 5 seconds. All right. And I'm creating this on the fly, so I'm going to create my timer on the fly. And a lot of this looks very familiar to you. It hasn't really changed much. But as you can see, the way we're displaying logic based on the solutions or the choices that I've made color-wise and font-wise, you can see here it looks a little different than what it did in 9.9, and that's because, you know, I've chosen a little different approach. Now, you can go with the classic approach in which it'll look very much the same as what you're used to today, and so you might want to start with that. Now, to actually trigger our screen, we're going to need a display coil over here, but let's go ahead and take a look at the navigator section, and under the user interface section, let me expand that, and under main screen, which is a screen group, I'm going to right click and say new screen, and then I'm going to go ahead and name this screen. Let's just call it logo. Okay, we can call it pretty much whatever we want. I'm going to call it logo, and right away you'll notice that as soon as I created this screen, a new tab was created called Logo. It could have been just Screen 1 if I'd have left that alone. And now I've got my graphics editing environment available to work on this particular screen. So there are a couple new things here to take a look at. First of all, you'll notice in the project toolbar, or toolbox I should say, this has changed now to graphic type objects for configuration, as opposed to they were previously populated with logic type tools, if you will. So that is new here with the toolbox. We've also expanded the area over here, this bar over here with more choices. And if you right click in the screen area, you'll also notice there's quite a few more choices here as well, including setting the background for any particular screen, which can be a handy feature. And then one thing you'll notice is you don't just have the choice between what color you want the background to be, you know, whether it's solid or gradient or what have you. You also have custom patterns that you can choose, and we'll show you one of those later. or you can import a user image. I'm going to go ahead and use the user image capability to bring in my company logo to create this screen. So I'm going to scale it to maintain the aspect ratio. All right, so I don't want it to be, distorted or anything like that. And then I'm going to select my image. And I need to navigate to the folder containing my image. And there we go, the Horner logo right there, ready for me to import. I hit open and OK. And there we go. I have effectively, just by programming the background of this first screen, I've created a screen that displays our logo. And in my logic, I'm just going to change it so that screen only comes up for the first 5 seconds or so that the machine is on. So let me switch back to main, which is our logic section here. I'm going to go ahead and drop a coil onto the screen here. And I'm going to assign a new variable, and I'm going to call it logo screen. That's a new variable. All right. I'll press the variable button. I'll press the define button, and I'm going to go ahead and map this to %D1, which is the coil or contact, the internal bit that's effectively mapped to screen number 1. So now this logo screen variable, which is a Boolean, is tied to D1. And when I press OK, you can see that sure enough, I'm going to be displaying this particular screen by energizing D1, which is tied to my variable, which is tied, of course, to screen number 1. All right, so that's a quick little look at some of the background capabilities that we have here. Now, from a logic standpoint, not a lot has changed. Again, I mentioned the fact that a lot of the new features for logic went in with Cscape 9.9 different service packs. But I'm going to go ahead and build a really simple start-stop circuit here. So let me just get that done so I can illustrate some of our graphical capabilities here in a minute. So we'll start with a start push button, which we're just going to map to the screen. We're not going to have it tied to any particular real-world I/O point or anything. But on our stop push button, we are going to go ahead and map that to, let's say, the third digital input, %I3, because that's probably coming from an actual push button. And then we'll turn on a pump, which is another real-world device. So I'll name it pump. And then as that variable is created, and I'm doing all these on the fly, I will map that one to a particular real-world output as well. And then we'll finish up this quick little rung with adding the seal contact around the start push button. Okay, so now, again, this looks very similar, if not identical, to what you're currently using with variable-based advanced ladder in Cscape 9.9. But let's say now we want to build a screen to execute this start, stop, and monitoring purposes. Let's do that. So let's go back here to our project navigator under the main screen, and let's right-click again and add another new screen. And this one, let's go ahead and just call this one pump control. Okay, and let me edit that one in there. Pump control. There we go. So I've got a new screen called pump control, and look at this. We've got a new tab that's been opened called pump control. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust my grid settings on this screen. So I'm going to right-click here, go to grid settings. I'm going to get rid of the primary grid in terms of viewing and snapping. All right, I prefer to do that most of the time. And then also, let's go ahead and add a background to this while we're at it. So let's do a set background. Now, of course, you can do this by just putting a color on there, but let's go ahead and do a pattern this time. We showed an image last time. Let's do a pattern. So I'm selecting pattern and select pattern. Press that button again on this dialog box. And now we have these predefined patterns that we can use as backgrounds really on any screen, or really even any push button if you wish. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick one. Let's go ahead and use one that's got a brushed aluminum type look to it here, just to give a little bit of pizzazz to the background of the screen. I'm not sure if that's brushed aluminum or not, but it's a pretty snazzy looking background, so we'll use that as our background. And no matter where I click on the screen, it's not going to be selecting the background because, I don't want that. I want to be placing objects on top of it. All right, so let's just do the start, stop, and those sorts of things. And over here under our toolbox, let's go under the touch objects, because that's the category in which we'll find buttons and switches, including the buttons and switches that we're going to want to use to start our pump, for instance. So I selected button switch, I clicked and dragged an approximate size, it came up with the default button, and when I double click on it, now I have my choice between different categories of buttons. So if I go in the push button section, You can see here's a whole variety of push buttons that are available in different styles. All right. I can also go to a toggle switch area if there was a toggle switch I was looking for. Some of them like you'll find on your phone, others more traditional looking toggle switches. Okay, so, and slide switches for that matter. You've also got multi-position switches available for, replicating a on-off selector switch or dial switch type approach, or even this toggle looking switch here. So you've got a whole variety of different options, but for now, let's just go ahead and just use a standard regular push button, and let's assign it as our start push button. But you can see there that we had lots of choices there in terms of our button styles, if you will. So some new choices there that weren't available before. Now, if I want to put some text next to that, I can go under Fixed Objects and go to Text Label. This is very similar to what you do currently when you select a text object. So I'm going to call this Start Pump. I'll increase the font size and also, I guess, arrange the text the way I want it, move it next to here if that's the way I want to put it, and there we go. We've got our Start Pump button. Let's say, for instance, that one of the things we want to do is we want to display the speed of the pump. So maybe we want to have a meter that is showing maybe from 0 to 100% the speed of the pump. Well, we've definitely enhanced our gauges and meters, so let's go to the Live Graphics Data section here, and let's find meter. Let's find meter, and we'll click and drag. And on first glance, it may look very similar to what you're used to on Cscape 9.9. But once again, we have many more choices here. So if I go down to meter type, I have, in addition to the one we've been using in 9.9, we also have several new meter types available here. I'll just go ahead and pick one. All right, it's going to inform me that I'm changing all my settings for this new meter, which is fine. And I'll create a new variable called pump speed. All right, now this particular object currently is 16 bits only for the beta. So it's integer only for the beta. But at release, this is one of the objects that absolutely you'll be able to choose. You'll be able to use it with a real variable as well. So if it turns out that your speed, is a real value instead of an integer value, you'll still be able to use this object with a real variable. So that's going to be very nice. Let's just leave it at 0 to 100% there, and show the scale limits and say OK. Of course, it's got to create my new variable, which it has done. And there we go. Oh, instead of saying meter, let's change this to say pump speed. Oh, we'll just say speed. How about that? And percentage. Got it. All right, so now we have a little different style of meter than we've supported before. So that's another new option here with Cscape 10. Okay, so another thing I want to show you is the trending capability, because trending is something that has really been improved with Cscape 10. So let me go ahead and let's create another new screen. And one pattern I think you'll notice is every time I go to create a new screen, I'm doing it over here from the Project Navigator area. So I'm going to call this one Trend, real fancy name there. All right. And I want to show you what the trend looks like. Now, one thing you may have noticed is every time I've created a new screen, so far at least, my grids are unique for every screen. So I eliminated the grid on the previous screen. The grid came back for this screen. Yet, if I flip back again to pump control, you'll see that that grid setting is the way I set it originally. So effectively, today at least, with the beta, the grid kind of resets itself on every screen. So you can set every screen differently if you wish for your grid and your zoom level for that matter. Whereas with the release, you're going to have the ability to do a universal setting as well if you choose, but that's not there yet. Okay, so let me go ahead and put a trend object on the screen here. So for that is a live graphic data object. So I go under trend graph. And let's put that up here on the screen. All right. And at first glance, it looks pretty similar to what we've done before. But as soon as I double click here, you're going to notice things are quite a bit different. There's certainly, it's laid out differently. There's more options. Let's kind of go through this. So just like with current trending, you have your choice of different types of trends. And I'm going to create a retentive trend. So a retentive trend, just like today, is a trend which is happening in the background regardless of whether it's displayed on the screen, and it's maintaining its value through power cycles. So I'm going to go ahead and create a retentive trend in this example. Now the trigger for a retentive trend could be any variable that turns on. I'm going to make it the always on variable because I want my trending, this particular trend at least, to be trending all the time, regardless of what's going on the machine. Next, let's take a look at some other display options. Now I have the option to display a grid, either horizontal or vertical or both. Let's go ahead and display both of them. I can set my sample rate here. Again, very similar to what we do today in either seconds or minutes or hours. I'll just leave this at 1 second. And then down here, things are starting to look a little differently. So let's look at the top. This is where our pens are situated, okay? And these are our data sources. So let's say that we're going to monitor current and frequency for our pump. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable called pump amps. Actually, before I do this, let me stop this point. Before I do this, let me change this data type for this first pen from decimal to floating point. Okay, so now I can add any variable that is a floating point variable. It doesn't have to be an integer type variable, which is a current limitation of our trending with 9.9. So let me go ahead and double click on data source. I'm going to add a new variable called pump amps. All right, it'll be a floating point value, not a Boolean value. So I need to make sure that's set properly. All right, say yes. And there we go. Okay, so now I've got pump amp set here. I can set my range, whatever that happens to be. Let's say it's 0 to 100. And then I can set a legend as well. And let's go ahead and set that as amps. And let's set that as a percentage. Okay, so percentage current. All right, and we can change the color. I'll make this one green. We'll leave it solid. And then a couple things. One thing you should notice is we got a legend that appeared up here, which shows us that amps is the green line. And then we have a title that appears that is just at its default of trend. So I'm going to get rid of that title for the purposes of this demonstration. Okay, so now we have amps as one of our pens. I'm going to go ahead and add another pen here. And even though I'm not going to add all 16, you can actually have as many as 16 pens on any given trend. Okay, and because of the fact that that's a lot of pens on a single display, another thing that you can do is you can, at runtime, you can turn on and off individual pens on the fly, at least for display purposes, even though they're still being trended in the background, just so you can, zoom in or at least hone in on a particular trend that you're interested in. Okay, so we have pump speed. Let's say that with pump speed, it's 0 to 100% as well. Now, another thing that I'm going to tell you but not necessarily show you, and that is you can actually have multiple y-axes. So I could have multiple pens on this trend. One could be scaled for amps, another could be scaled for percentage. They could be at different levels. So you can have up to 4 y-axes displayed on the screen. So that's something to be aware of. But for now, we'll just leave 0 to 100 for all these. For the pump speed, I'm going to go ahead and put a legend on that as well. All right, so that shows up at the top. All right. And that one, in this case, let's say, is a decimal value. So just an integer value. Let's leave that one there. All right, now on the x-axis, that's time, but that's obvious to a lot of folks. And for my example, I'm going to get rid of that legend for time. And I'm also, for instance, I'm going to decide not to show the range. All right, so I'm going to turn off the range for the x-axis, so that goes away. And I'm going to turn on the range for the y-axis. So 0 to 100 should show up on the y-axis along with the other ranges as well, or the other ticks as well. Okay, so that's our trend object. Of course, you can also enable replay. And when you enable replay, now you have controls that allow you to, go back at a trend that happened some time ago and take a look at historical data, because it takes that data and stores it to the micro SD. So pretty useful stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and name this particular file as, let's just call it pump. We'll just call it pump. I think it'll automatically add the .csv file on its own. I believe that's what will happen. But anyway, this is a look at the trend object. Okay, and just a little preview of kind of what it looks like there. Now, of course, the trends are going to be overlaid on top of each other. the pens will be. And then again, at runtime, you can turn individual ones on and off just by clicking on the legend for that particular pen. Next, let's go ahead and do a little bit with screen navigation, jumping from screen to screen. That hasn't changed a lot, but let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So let's go back to our pump control screen. Okay, and let's add a jump button, which is a touch object. And that's under screen jump here, and we'll just add it to the screen. This hasn't changed a whole lot, but you do have newer graphics in terms of the different icons that you can support for the jump object. So you have, if you go under attributes, even though they are similar categories, it's new graphics for the icons that you select. So if I select trend here, actually I can just get rid of that legend altogether if the icon does a good enough job of demonstrating for the user. Well, let's cancel that. Let's just go to screen 3. That's my trend screen. Okay, I also could have pressed that screen button there to navigate there. Hit OK, and you can see I've got new and updated screen jump objects. All right, and let's go ahead and, not simulate escape, let's allow escape to return. And then let's skip over here to our trend graph, and let's go ahead and place a jump object there as well. We'll just simulate an escaped key. All right, again, our screen jump, click and drag. All right, and double click here, simulate escape, and under legend, we'll just type ESC. All right, there we go. So there's our screen navigation, which again, hasn't changed a whole lot. Let me right click, and under grid setting, I don't want to snap to the primary grid. I'll show it, but not snap to it. And that'll give me more flexibility in where I place this particular object. Okay. So that is an example of a trend object. And of course, I followed it up with some jump objects. All right, let me show you one more thing. I'd like to kind of demonstrate the advanced or enhanced properties of objects that can be really useful for adjusting opacity or position on the screen or something like that. So again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to create a new screen. I'm going to call this one conveyor. Okay, now you still have the ability to add symbols here. Okay, so I could go to my fixed object area and I could select picture/graphic, and I can go in and double click here and I can select a symbol. So the symbol library is still supported with Cscape 10. So when I press select symbol, it's going to fire up the symbol library, and I can go ahead and load any symbol pretty much just like I did back with Cscape 9.9. But what I can also do, and I'll just go ahead and delete this object since I didn't use it, but what I can also do is we have a clip art category now. So in addition to the symbols that are available in the symbol library, there's also some clip art that's available. So you can go through different categories. There's categories, like agriculture. That was a little more unusual one since it has tractors and things, but you have barrels and tanks. You have motors and pumps, all those sort of things, gas cylinders, silos, et cetera, et cetera. So in addition to all the graphics available in the symbol library, you also now have clip art as well. Now the clip art is really just graphics. You can scale it however you want. Let me go ahead and drop one on the screen. Let's say that we're going to drop a centrifugal pump here. All right, so, oops, I need to do that this way. Centrifugal pump, click and drag, there we go. Now that centrifugal pump can be wherever I want to place it, like any other graphic. You'll notice that it keeps its aspect ratio appropriate, all those sorts of things. So I just wanted to quickly show you before I dive into the enhanced properties. I wanted to show you the clip art category that is available. All right, so I'm going to do something really basic. I'm going to take and go to a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to draw a very simple looking conveyor belt. Okay, so we're going to imagine that that's a conveyor belt. I'm not going to go through the trouble of importing a symbol, although I could do that just as easily. But I've just got a conveyor belt here. And let's say that on the screen, we're going to want to simulate a package or a product moving across the conveyor belt. So let's add a picture graphic here, and let's add a small product in the form of a graphic, and we will scale the image. and we want it to maintain its original aspect ratio, but still be scaled. And I'm going to select an image, and let's imagine it's a stepper motor. That's the product that's moving across the conveyor. Okay. And now I have my stepper motor. So I'm going to go ahead and place him like he's on the conveyor. Now, if we take a look at his position on the conveyor, down here in the lower left-hand corner, this tells you that his X position is 150 and his Y position is 136. So let's imagine that this is more or less where we want the product, but that we want the product to move across the conveyor at runtime and potentially have a position that could be as far right as this. So that goes all the way to what, 580. So if we create a variable and that variable varies its position between 150 and 580, then we can move that product across the screen at runtime and just have its position based upon, real life. If this is a 10-foot conveyor, we can scale our 10 feet to those counts I just mentioned, and we can simulate the position of the product on the conveyor belt. So how do we access those enhanced properties? Well, we just double click on the object and we go to attributes and we go to enhanced attributes. And from there, you can see we have a variety of them to choose from. Opacity, which is, how clear it is. In other words, how much of the background it allows to show through. Rotation, you can rotate an object on the fly. X position, Y position, width of the product, and height of the product. So in my example here, the only thing I'm changing is my X position. All the rest of these things are going to be fixed. So I'm going to create a variable called product position. Okay. And since it's a new variable, it doesn't exist yet. It's an unsigned integer. And I'm going to, in my program, what I would do is I would change the value of product position to reflect from a relative standpoint the position of this product on the conveyor. And then at runtime, this particular object right here is going to move to its appropriate X position while keeping its rotation and opacity and all the rest of the parameters the same. So that's how you access those enhanced features or enhanced attributes, if you will, for really any object. And I want to show you one more thing before we wrap up here. Let me go back to our pump control screen. Okay, and what I wanted to show you was the fact that pretty much for any object, you can customize the background. So let me see if that worked for the jump object. I think it does. Let's go here. Well, let's not do it for the jump object. Let's do it for, let's say, a data object. So let me go to live text data. Let's find a numeric data field here. And I'm not going to fill in all the variables and legends and things like that. You all have seen me do that 100 times, and that really hasn't changed. However, what has changed is, and I haven't done this in a while, let's see, let's go to background, display style. There we go. Okay, so you press display style. Okay, and then you can select the shape that you want for your live data object, whether it has a 3D bezel or not. And you can also control the background. So you can, again, not just select the color of the background, you can actually have an image on the background. So if you, instead of having a detailed or maybe a lengthy legend text to put on a data object, maybe you think it would work better just to show a picture of something instead. So you could instead select an image to display instead. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say that we want to select this stepper motor as the background there. It looks a little wonky from the dialog box, but I'm guessing that once we go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and just assign a variable here so it's happy with me. Let's say that this is the, let's say this is the product count, okay, that we're doing here. And let's leave everything else the same. And I'll say, okay, it's going to create this new variable since I'm doing everything on the fly. And then, okay, obviously where I have placed this graphic doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of where the data is located and where the legend's located. But I could do something like, I could put the data in a different location, for instance, over here on the left or the right. And I could also get rid of the legend completely. And I could come up with I did a lousy job of placing the data, but you get the drift. You have the flexibility of putting a graphic in the background as opposed to just a color or a gradient or something on that order. Okay, so you'll have to excuse me for my lack of design skill there. Okay, so that is a look at, hopefully gives you a feel for Cscape 10. Now, there are dozens of features and functions I haven't even touched on. So this is really just getting the ball rolling as far as Cscape 10 is concerned. And we'll have lots more on this channel when it comes to videos and instruction on how to use Cscape 10 as the weeks advance. Okay, so here's our wrap up. Cscape 10 will be starting its public beta later this month. We're shooting for July 19th, which is 2 weeks from today. We'll see if it hits on that particular day, but it's going to be later this month in preparation for its launch during the fourth quarter. Now, Cscape 10 will support any current OCS controller. Now, a lot of the graphics capabilities I showed, you know, being able to put a background on anything and those sorts of things are going to only be available with Canvas. So be aware of that, okay? All the graphics capabilities aren't going to be available in a micro OCS or an XL Prime. To take advantage of some of those things, you're going to need to use Canvas. But some of the other things, like displaying your logic the way you want and arranging your desktop the way you want, that's going to work with any product regardless of what product you're using. Now, again, if you're looking to use Canvas, though, you will need to use Cscape 10, and the two will be released pretty much simultaneously. And if you're interested in participating in the beta program and nobody's contacted you yet, please feel free to get in touch with us. Again, the beta program is going to start later this month, but it's going to go for some time. So even if you might not be involved with the beta program at the very beginning, it's very possible we can get you involved, you know, in a few weeks or a few days after it starts, whatever the case may be. So just contact us and we'll work to get you signed up. So this is the point of the program where I remind you we're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Well, in this case, this week was Wednesday, right? And we're either pre-recorded, streaming live with somebody answering questions, or we're fully live like today with somebody standing by to answer questions. So join us every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And of course, we all have busy schedules, and know that the replays are always available on the YouTube channel, and you always have the opportunity to comment and ask questions in the comment section. Okay, we're celebrating 10 years of the Horner Lighting Group. Their videos are available alongside our great automation content on the Horner YouTube channel. And don't forget training opportunities. I believe the basic OCS training class is still full, but the advanced class still has a couple slots available. So sign up for those on our website. Also, to check out the complete July schedule in terms of live streams, you can check that out on our webpage at that particular URL. And also keep an eye out for our newsletter. That always announces those as well. And then next week, we think we've got a fun topic. We're going to help you discover some little known but useful system registers. The OCS has literally hundreds of system registers, and a lot of them get overlooked. They're published in the user's manual, but let's face it, how many of us peruse user's manuals of our products as thoroughly as we should? So we're going to point out some of the more useful ones that you may not know about during next week's session. Okay, so if you have yet to subscribe to our channel, don't hesitate to do so. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. Okay, so thanks for joining this week. And until next week when we talk system registers, let's all get out there and do us some good.